And there we go. We are live. I think it does say we're live. Hi, everybody at the Elephant and Castle community. It's Nick from Retribe joining you again on a beautiful Tuesday. It's cloudy, but it's beautiful. It's sunny somewhere with Melanie Cressey, who works for Dementia Friendly. She's the Dementia Friendly Coordinator. Am I right?
Yeah, Dementia Friendly Communities Coordinator.
Communities Coordinator with the Alzheimer Society in Croydon and Southwark, and you've come along to enlighten us and talk about the world of dementia, to destigmatize some of the myths around it, and I'm looking forward to this conversation because there's towards the end, my father, who's passed away now, he had signs of dementia and was really struggling with life, and it's something, Melanie, in your bio that you talk about, the stigma around it. So a lot of the myths around dementia and Alzheimer's. So we'll get into all of that. I'm really grateful that you could join us today. First of all, joining us from, I imagine it's beautiful sunny Epsom, and you're just blurring the background behind you. Just so you don't make me jealous. But thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. I'm absolutely fine, thank you.
Good. Did I do okay with the introduction? I didn't quite get things right, did I? There was a few things.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yes,
Yeah.
Dementia Friendly Communities Coordinator, Southwark and Croydon, based at Alzheimer Society.
There you go. Okay. Thank you. So thanks for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about your role and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So my role is about helping to create dementia-friendly communities, which is a community where people living with dementia are respected, involved, included, understood. So it's quite a broad remit, but we work with all kinds of organisations, from health and social care, voluntary sector, arts and culture, business and retail, sports organisations, anybody really that might come across somebody living with dementia or carer of a person with dementia. And it's about sort of supporting them and equipping them to be able to, to sort of be effective in communication and supporting the people that they come across. So yeah, it's quite a broad role, but it can involve training and information, providing tips and guidance, connecting people to other organisations, sort of creating that network across Southwark, which we call the Dementia Action Alliance in Southwark. And it could be, all kinds of things, helping people to come up with new activities to help people with dementia, or to tweak the activities and the actions that they're already doing. So yeah.
Let's get into, I suppose, really what is dementia, because we see commercials that talk about both dementia and Alzheimer's. And there's some of them are quite disturbing, where they're normally people who are in kind of that last phase of their life, and they're forgetting things, they're not knowing people who they're around. It's quite heartbreaking, and it really tugs on the emotions of us and our experience in later life, on this planet. But I suppose, could you give me a definition of what dementia is?
Yeah, sure. So dementia is the term for a condition where the brain is physically affected by diseases of the brain. So if you imagine across my brain, there's a lot of different fairy lights, and each of those fairy lights represents a skill or a function. And over time, some of those fairy lights dim, some will flicker, and some will go out completely. And it's like that with dementia. So over time, different functions of the brain are affected by disease. And one of those diseases is Alzheimer's disease. Dementia is like the umbrella term for that condition where that happens. Right. And Alzheimer's is one of the diseases. Vascular dementia is another type. Frontal temporal dementia. There's over 100 different types of dementia, but it really is a very physical. It's not a normal part of aging. It's not just a part of getting old. Younger people can get dementia too. And yeah, there's a real kind of prevention message around keeping healthy and well, because that can reduce your chance of developing dementia. But even then, anybody can really get dementia, and you're more likely to get it as you age. But we know people under the age of 65 and even in their 20s and 30s and 40s have develop dementia as well, which is called young onset dementia or early onset dementia.
So is dementia like what? So dementia is what the overall umbrella of what
Yes.
brain diseases. So are they like, is dementia the symptom, or is it just a classification?
So dementia is the term for that condition where the brain is damaged by disease. So you're right, it is the umbrella term. And Alzheimer's disease is one of the diseases that causes dementia. And there are lots of different types of dementia which cause damage to the brain.
It's really kind of interesting to know too that you say, even though it tends to be something that we say is target, it happens in older people, that it actually happens in younger people too. So is this new? Like, is it like in terms of affecting younger people? Is it a disease that has always been around that we just haven't noticed, or is it something that is kind of social and in the way that we're living nowadays? It's different than maybe the way we were living a few decades ago.
I think so. Younger people have always had dementia. I think that maybe it was overlooked or confused as being something else before. Dementia is on the rise generally across the UK because you are more likely to develop it as you age. And so the population is aging, but also more people thankfully are getting diagnosed now because there's more education around it. We're working really hard to reduce the stigma and have dementia appropriate services. So more people are approaching the GP to start that diagnostic process. So there are more people with dementia, partly because of an aging population, partly because it's being recognised more as well and people being diagnosed more.
Really sad, Melanie, because you think that, somebody who has cancer or diabetes, they can describe what the feeling is like to have that. But I imagine people with brain diseases, it's harder for them to describe what it's like to live with it. Is that true, or is it?
It's really complex. So I've met people who haven't really been aware or may have been in denial. It's hard to tell which. And I've also spoken to people who have been quite clear, telling me what it is that they're living with. So it depends on the person, possibly the type of dementia and how early they get diagnosed as well. I think what we're seeing now is more people being diagnosed earlier on, so quite able to articulate what they're experiencing. And also it depends on the listener and if the person feels ashamed of their condition and able to kind of openly talk about it. And then other people might not know they have dementia, but might talk about brain feeling foggy or, the extent, what's happening to them in their lives. So it definitely depends. I remember one lady I supported was very, people sometimes tend to be quite poetic in their language with dementia sometimes. And a lady with dementia once told me her brain used to be a 3-course meal and now it was just like soup. So I thought that was really interesting that, it was sad, but I thought it was good that she could articulate what she was feeling. I can understand her a bit more and what she was dealing with.
So one of the things that you aim to do is reduce the stigma around brain diseases and dementia. Why is it that you think there's so much shame and there's so much for this feeling of like and I imagine it hinders the diagnosis because people just don't want to admit to anybody that maybe they're having some symptoms, which I'm sure we can maybe identify some of the symptoms. But let's talk about the stigma around dementia and how you've seen it manifest itself in your 20 years experience.
So I think that some of the stigma comes from embarrassment. So as a society, I think we very much value memory and logical thought. Whereas, so that part of the brain, the hippocampus, is really damaged by dementia. Whereas the part of the brain, the amygdala, which manages feelings and emotions, remains quite strong with dementia. But I think as a society, we focus on, rational thoughts, dates, times, places, all that kind of stuff. And it can be embarrassing for people when they're out and about and forget to do things, forget how to use them, how to pay for things with money, or get lost, start to talk and like lose the thread of conversation or not remember the word. So I think some of that we can do something about, because as a society or as a community, as a dementia friendly community, we can be more understanding and patient and realise that, the brain is being affected by dementia, by disease, and it's not the person's fault, and they just need our help to have a bit more time and more understanding the way we ask questions. And that, yeah, we run a dementia awareness session which covers sort of communication tips and how to have a more dementia friendly physical environment, a building, and all those kind of things that we can do to help people.
And as you say, we have a society now that's growing older. Do you feel, in general, society is embracing, people who are in the latter parts of their lives more than they used to be? I mean, I know growing up, like I'm almost 52, and I remember like thinking of a 52-year-old as someone who's ancient. When I'm in my teens, I wouldn't have thought it was someone like me, I'm still quite active and doing stuff. And so I think that my perception of what I thought old has changed. And I'm wondering what your experience has been like with actually just kind of our perception of what it is like to grow older, and diseases or not. Are we respecting, or are we becoming more compassionate and responsible to the aging parts of our society?
I think it's both, really. Yeah, I think in some ways we know a lot more. My grandmother had dementia when I was in my teens, in the 90s, and there wasn't very much known about it then. But yeah, I have a lot of hope with the future generation, with school age children. If you go into schools and do a talk, they seem to know quite a lot already, and there seems to be less judgment amongst the younger generation too, which is very reassuring. But I still hear quite a lot of myths and misconceptions about dementia too. So it's just chipping away constantly. And as you say, it's whether people embrace older people too, or mental health, or all of those other things. So yeah, it's a difficult question. I think it is improving in some ways, but maybe I've just become a bit impatient with things not improving quickly enough.
Well, what scared me a little bit was a lot of the treatment towards elderly people during COVID, because it was an illness that really affected elderly people, and I think that it kind of brought to light, I suppose, my own mortality. And I was thinking, what happens if I was, this was all happening and I was in my 80s? Would I be in a care home? What all of the things that we don't really think about, when we're not in need of it, but how we want to live our life when we get a little bit older. Are we going to ever want to retire? Are we going to want to be in a care home or live at home? And there's all these, it really, like I say, COVID brought to light, I think, a societal look at elderly people and how, especially with the care homes, and how they were treated. But like, I'm really, as you spoke about the younger generation, and I'm a stepdad to a 13-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 6-year-old. And even in that age gap, the 6-year-old's level of empathy is immense. This is like, he actually will sit and pause and listen when people are talking about things like this, because he's trying to process it in his brain. And we'll talk openly about being kind to strangers in ways that I never did when I was that I can remember. And I wonder if maybe that is, we can say well to the education system that's actually helping these younger kids become a little bit more empathetic and thoughtful towards people in society. So I do have hope for the younger generation. But I suppose, yes, it does. This whole conversation is bringing to light, because I've lost both my parents now. They both passed away, and that time my mom's been like, it was 11 years ago to a week that she passed away, and both of them struggled with their mental well-being in their elder age out of retirement. And I'm wondering how much that both of them, when they retired, they lost their purpose. They lost their jobs. They lost their where they were valued, I suppose, in their own sense, and from a self-esteem. So have you seen that process of people retiring, kind of ending what they thought of what their purpose, and then dwelling into unhealthy aspects that could promote poor mental health?
Yeah, I can't talk about general mental health generally, but in relation to dementia, I think that when people have kind of lost their role, there's the dementia itself, but when people have lost their role in society, whether it's a job or in the community or in their family role, then it can really, as well as having dementia, it can, that loss of purpose and meaning is, I think that's what people struggle with almost the most, even alongside their dementia symptoms. Because when a person has dementia, I think people do write them off, but we're always saying that, there's no cure with dementia yet. It's about helping people to live well as possible. There are all those sort of challenges that people face day to day, which carers have to, cope with as well. But I think if we can help people to do what they can do whilst they can still do it, it really helps people's self-esteem. And we know that there is a link between dementia and depression. So if people have dementia, sometimes if they're not engaging socially anymore or being able to stay active or use their brain as much as they can, then it can impact on someone's self-esteem. So there's the dementia itself, and then there's how one is treated by society or those around them, and giving people opportunities to still take part in the things that they can do and be included and respected and not written off. It's really important. That's probably one of the most important things, I would say.
Yeah. Why don't we talk a little bit about symptoms? And I suppose this has got to be for everybody without scaring people, because if you say some symptom, and I'll be like, oh my God, Melanie said that, I'm going to start Googling.
Yeah.
But yeah, so what are some of the things that we can kind of keep our eye out for, not only with our own brain health, but also in that of our loved ones?
Yeah, so some of the key issues with some of the key symptoms are memory problems. So people can tend to sometimes forget the things that happened that morning, like the short-term memory is important, but may well remember quite clearly things that happened a long time ago. And that would be a lot clearer. There's difficulty with sequencing, so putting things in the right order. So a person may remember how to do all the steps to make a cup of tea, for example, but getting them in the right order is another challenge. There's visual perception. So somebody with dementia might see the same things that we see, but the brain interprets it differently. So shiny floors may appear wet, or a black mat in front of a shop may be confused to be a hole in front of that shop. Confusing swirly patterns on a tablecloth might be confusing. So that's another one. And communication. So being able to, sometimes calling things the wrong thing, like a dog, a horse, or, that kind of thing. Inhibitions is another one. So just as we might think something and think, oh, that's not appropriate to say it, a person with dementia might just come out and say it, which can be quite refreshing. But yeah, is one of the things. So it's a combination of things, and sometimes mood is affected directly as well. Although I would say sometimes mood is affected is related to how people experience the other symptoms. But I would always say that anyone who's worried should go to the GP in the first instance, because they can start that process of ruling out things that might be similar to dementia, but or some type of dementia, but might actually be attributed to something else which could be treated. So it's really important to take that first step.
I'm going to be honest, like some of the things that you talked about, like they do happen in my life. The memory, like calling one of my boys a different name, and I know my eyes are a little bit off, but I wouldn't think that a black mat was a hole, but sometimes I definitely do. I can see things are not what they used to be when I was a kid. Is that just aging, or I mean, is it? And it seems to me too, like things that could kind of go up and down. Sometimes I'll be really on it, but then sometimes when I'm under stress, or I have some anxiety in my life, or I'm just kind of scared, maybe I'm not eating as well as I should be. I'm not drinking as much water as I should be. And I suppose it's got to be this thing of, yeah, can some of those symptoms manifest themselves in daily life? And when would the point where you go, maybe you would want to make a trip to the GP? And then once you make the trip to the GP, what do they do? What do they test for? That's a lot. Two questions there.
Yeah, so it's hard to diagnose people, obviously, just without seeing the doctor to do that properly. But you're right, there are other things which can cause confusion or memory loss. I think it's when it's sort of a pattern, but also the people that I've spoken to that care for a person with dementia, it tends to be when they think, that's really unusual for them, that's, quite out of character, or they should remember that, but they aren't. So, it's worth keeping an overall picture. But yeah, there is a diagnostic process, and the GP kicks it off by taking some tests and asking some questions. And then at that point can help to identify things like whether it's a thyroid problem or a UTI, or a vitamin deficiency or a side effect of certain medication. So there are other things which can be looked at in terms of the person's general health. And then, yeah, significant concern would go on to a specialist who would make proper assessment and diagnosis from that way on. So that can involve scans, doing a test which kind of tests different part of the brain, taking information from friends and family, biological history, all of those things sort of, go into checking whether a person may or may not have dementia, and what type of dementia as well. Because you have to remember with dementia, unlike other causes of memory loss and confusion, it's where the brain actually it is physically different. The brain may look actually physically different. So, whereas all those other things are treatable.
This is an awful lot to take in, and I'm wondering if we can go into something that you wrote about that you guys do is like around the misconceptions or the myths around dementia. What would you say are some of the misconceptions that people see around dementia today, and the myths?
Yeah, so I think that dementia is a normal part of age, and it's a natural part of getting old. It's not very helpful because it stops people from getting a diagnosis. When people have a diagnosis, it can be easier to plan for the things that you need. You can, the right help and support, and you can apply for a lasting power of attorney and all of those kind of practical things as well. So that's one of the myths, and that also stops younger people from being recognised as having dementia. One of the other myths is that people living with dementia can no longer contribute to daily life, which is also, they might have reduced capacity in some areas, but are still able to get involved and take part with the right support. I think there's also a lot of misunderstanding around the fact that it is progressive. So what somebody might need in the earlier stages would be different to further on down the line. So that's another one. But I think also the key thing to remember is that each person with dementia is unique. So once you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with dementia, and sort of treating everybody the same is, not helpful. People will have different ways of managing their symptoms, different approaches, different things will help. And it can really help to know about somebody's life history and what they've done in the past. That can help us to know how to support them in the present. But yeah, tiring everyone with the same brush, probably the most unhelpful, I would say.
Yeah. Melanie, you said that you experienced dementia with your grandmother, was it?
Yeah. Yes.
I'm always very interested to know, like, before you got into this, it said for 20 years you were a carer in some aspect of helping people. I'm really interested to always know how that became part of your journey, 20 years ago, to start kind of devoting your life into an industry that we know is not really well paid. So what was it, or what is it that inspired you to live a life of trying to help other people?
Yeah, so when my grandmother was, well, when I was 13, my grandmother had dementia, and I was just a kid, so I wasn't involved in the well, I say just a kid. I was a kid, so I wasn't involved in some of the practical aspects, but I sort of became her companion, really. And looking back, that probably gave my granddad some respite as well. And what I realized at that point was that I could still have meaningful interactions with her, even even though at the end she was saying words that could be understood sort of as making sense in terms of our English language. So I realized that you could still spend time with somebody and give them joy, essentially, and engage in enjoyable activities, provide a safe environment for some error, because I was completely learning from her. I tried to sort of introduce some activities which she couldn't relate to at all, so I'd try something else, and that worked. And then even kind of right at the end of her life, it was more about sort of holding her hand and singing and being a reassuring presence. So that's where it all sort of started. And then from then I kind of got interested about learning about diseases, disabilities, conditions like that, and people having a voice and having choice and freedom as much as possible, and tailored activities. But that communication was always key, as much as other interventions. It's the power of effective communication can really be what helps people to be themselves.
You're 13 and you're trying to figure things out, communicating with your grandmother. Was it frustrating, or was it something inside of you that you just knew it felt right to navigate to those moments where you could decipher what she was saying? So I imagine there's a level of empathy and patience in you that
Yeah.
is, at such a young age. I'm really kind of in awe, and I'm just imagining what it would have been like with you just sitting with your grandmother and trying to decipher some of the things that you were saying. Did you ever feel impatient? Did you, was it frustrating? And then when it clicked, what was that feeling like?
I think because I didn't have, so my granddad had dementia when I was 20, and that was harder because I was more involved in supporting my mum with that. So I think because I had more of a formal role as a carer, if you like. But when my grandmother had dementia, it was like there was no responsibility to get her to do things or whatever. So, it was more spending time with her, and that quality of that interaction. Any frustration with that, I think, and the way that she lived with her dementia was, she was quite sort of chilled out with it, I suppose, but also not in a way that kind of where she withdrew into herself, which some people do. I mean, having said that, I've worked with some quite feisty people with dementia, and I've quite enjoyed that, because it shows people still have a voice and a bit of a spark to them. But I would say it was harder when my granddad had dementia in my 20s, because I did have more of a proactive caring role, so I felt a bit more of the struggle with that.
And then you decided to make a vocation out of it and make this your life. What's harder, when it's in your family, or when when it's part of your job? Like, where can you kind of like draw the line of like, I'm here, this is my job, I'm here to make this a safe space and to enable this person to flourish the best that they can. but then that bit when you were 20 and you were helping your mother, and you're saying that was getting harder. So is it harder when it's in the family or when you're a carer?
I would say it's just different, but it's probably harder to have those boundaries when it's your own family. You also have those sort of, you take on roles that society expects of you, whatever those are. There's, yeah, without going into the psychology of that, there's certain expectations with families, and you know, it's 24/7. So if you're not around them, you're worried about them and things like that. So I would say it's harder to switch it off, probably, but then it probably depends on the person. I'm just sort of speaking from my own experience. I think with when it's just a role in that family and how that all works.
Yeah, you got a little, your line is getting a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Is it okay?
Yeah, it's been a bit in and out, but I've been able to manage to hear what you're saying. So I'm imagining everybody else will be able to too. I'm wondering now, when someone gets diagnosed with dementia, depending on what the disease is, and you said that there's no cures or anything yet found to help aid with this. So what kind of life can they expect, and how do carers like yourself enable someone who's being diagnosed with either Alzheimer's or dementia or a brain disease? What are the things that you do to try to enable them to flourish the best that they can?
Well, at Alzheimer's Society, we have one-to-one support, and for my colleagues, they're dementia advisors or support workers. So they meet people post-diagnosis and help care people with dementia and carers and the people that care for them to navigate the system, to provide information about dementia and things that they can apply for, and how, you know, explore how to live with the condition, because that's what we're talking about, really. And there's support groups. There's also activity groups in Southwark as well. So Alzheimer's Society has a memory cafe, dementia cafe in Nunhead. But yeah, we're trying to support other organisations to set up dementia friendly groups. There's a walking sport activity that takes place by Ballers Academy. So that's absolutely brilliant. There's lots of arts and culture organisations that provide dementia friendly screenings at the cinema, or the Dulwich Picture Gallery do kind of art appreciation things. Yeah, so all around. We've also been working with the Elephant Park site to provide dementia awareness sessions to all of the staff, and working around dementia friendly building design. So there's no quick fix. I think people will always struggle with things, but it's about everybody seeing it as a priority and doing their bit and taking their individual actions.
I'm wondering, is dementia friendly like everybody friendly? What would the difference between or what would a dementia friendly setup look like? And can it benefit just anybody, even though you're not afflicted with a brain disease?
Yeah, so I'd say dementia friendly probably does make things easier for other people as well that are struggling with other conditions or illnesses, or other struggles. We say dementia friendly partly because it's good to say the word dementia and say that in a way that isn't stigmatized, because it is a fact. It's a fact. But also with dementia, certain parts of the brain are affected. It affects people in different ways. So a dementia friendly place is about looking at the problems that someone might face and how to support them with it. But you're right, I think if somewhere is age friendly, it should be dementia friendly as part of it. Or some of the things that help people with dementia would help people with a learning disability, to navigate, or a physical disability, or a visual perception difficulty. But we tend to say dementia because you know, it does look particularly at what happens in the brain of someone with dementia and how we can support them with that.
You know, I keep saying brain disease. I keep saying dementia, brain disease, Alzheimer. Dementia still has, I suppose, there's a stigma around that word within me. And I don't know why it is, Melanie. I just have a hard time saying it. And if, you know, maybe because, you know, that was the word that was used to describe my dad's like condition later on. And I probably have some kind of, because he was a brilliant man, and he had a big brain. You know, he could read through books and quote Shakespeare, and, you know, he was a brilliant educator. And then when I was told that, you know, he's getting onset dementia, it was brought on. I mean, he was also a heavy drinker and a heavy smoker. And I was just like, no, he's just killing his brain, you know. But I suppose when that diagnosis of dementia came in, I still have some kind of, I don't know, it pulls at my heart a little bit. So that word, I suppose, it does affect a lot of people in a lot of different ways. It makes you feel, you know, just like I suppose like cancer is a very, you feel it in the word. And so does dementia. So I'm just saying, like, I'm just pointing out the fact that several times in this conversation, I've been saying brain disease instead of dementia.
Yeah. I think that sometimes the stigma comes from the shame and embarrassment, but other times, obviously, it has a personal connection to many people. When I'm out and about delivering sessions to whether it's retail staff or art galleries or a sports centre, these are people that are providing professional support, but will quite often have a personal connection or experience. So we're always really mindful of that. And we do focus on how to support people to live well with their dementia, but we're also aware that people have had experiences which are really impacted on them and their life. There's a lot of loss as well with dementia, and, you know, the impact on families is really significant as well. And I think a good dementia-friendly community will recognise carers and family members as part of the people that are affected by dementia as well.
Now, I know this is your job, but I imagine your goal is to eventually hope that you're not needed, and that cures are found for dementia. But I know you're not a doctor or anything, but maybe do you have some things that you would tell people to do to look after this beautiful thing of ours? And I mean, that comes, I know, just with dementia, but if I see someone on a bicycle nowadays, I'm like, do you wear a helmet? Like, we need to protect what's up here, and that includes food and hydration, what we put into our bodies. What would be some of the things that what are the things that you do, I suppose, to look after your brain?
Probably not enough. I think it's tricky when you're trying to manage various different things in life to get everything right, but I think it is balance. And we always say that what's good for your heart is good for your head. So if you look after your heart, it's going to help what's up there. So yeah, things like exercise, sleeping well, reducing stress, you know, not smoking, physical activity, all of those things will help. But I also believe we have to enjoy ourselves as well. So it's always that balance. And if we're so stressed about doing those things, it can be counterproductive too. So I think just being kind to ourselves and investing in ourselves is the way I see it. Know that we're worth looking after. All those things do help to reduce the likelihood of getting dementia. It won't mean that people won't get dementia. But I think also, if a person does have a diagnosis of the dementia, if that has started, then all of those things are still important to help people to live well, you know, physically, mentally, emotionally, socially. Once a person has dementia as well, it's about helping them to make the most of what they still can do.
From diagnosis to, I suppose, you know, the ultimate thing is where dementia contributes to the death of somebody. How does that happen? Because I imagine it's like you said, dementia affects the person differently. Everyone's different. So how does it go from a diagnosis to ultimately, you know, the passing of somebody?
So my understanding of that is probably quite basic, not being a clinician, but just basically the dementia eventually does affect more parts of the brain and therefore more parts of the body and more functions of what we can do. So, and then alongside that, if a person is elderly, some of the things they might be experiencing as an older person with other long-term conditions will sort of run alongside that as well. So that's my very basic understanding of it. But it does depend on the person and also the type of dementia as well. So we know this is very basic way of explaining it, but with Alzheimer's, there's plaques and tangles of protein which cause damage to the brain structure, whereas with vascular dementia, beg your pardon, a person's will experience mini strokes, and they will sort of plateau and then have mini strokes and then dip and then plateau like that. It's more of a step-like progression. Alzheimer's is more sort of more like a slope, generally more of a gentle progression, but you can have a mixture of the two as well. So it depends. Different types of dementia damage the brain in different ways and different parts of the brain and at different rates, but the rate of progression is different for everybody and depends on different factors. With younger people it can tend to be quicker as well, but I know people sometimes can live with dementia for quite a long time.
And for a case study, let's say, of somebody who you care for who lives with dementia, share with us how beautiful their life can be. If properly cared for and looked after, they can still enjoy abundance of joy in their lives.
So at the moment, I don't have individual people I support one-to-one, but I have previously. I would say, it means different things to different people, but we know that, for instance, if people's personhood is respected, like who they are as an individual person, that's important alongside all the other things which help people to live well, like taking care of their sort of keeping warm and well and protected and safe. But I think also it's really important to help people to continue to take risks and not overprotect people and reduce their freedom. So I think alongside my passion for dementia, I'm quite passionate about people having a voice and having choice and control of their own lives. So I'd say it's not a case study, sorry. But I would say for me, if a person is sort of respected, still have a voice and a choice over their own lives for as long as they can, that would be the best thing, because sometimes if you remove that choice from people, they may be more likely to get frustrated and angry and all of those kind of things. So but just being listened to is really important.
I imagine you in your job you experience a lot of heartbreak, and I also imagine you experience a lot of joy, because if the joy, if the heartbreak outweighed the joy, you probably wouldn't want to do that job for much longer. So there must be a lot of joy that you do get. Can you kind of, in the last few minutes, describe, how the job fulfills you as a human being?
Yeah, it's you see breakthroughs where things really help people and where people challenge other people's myths. So I ran a dementia befriending service once, and there was a concert pianist who was no longer playing, had a piano in his room. He played all over the world, really respected gentleman, had dementia, and I think probably lost his confidence. A befriender came to visit him every week and didn't put any pressure on him, but just sort of gently encouraged him to play the piano. And he began to play for her, and it sort of all came back to him. And then he ended up putting on a performance for all his family, friends, neighbours, carers, paid carers. So I think, and the befriender said he went into the bathroom, kind of put on a shirt and tie, smartened himself up, combed his hair. And so I think that's where the joy comes from, is when you know, sometimes people can no longer do things, and it's cruel to make them still do things where they've lost that ability. But when people still do things that challenge our perception of them, and kind of get a sense of themselves back, the person they once were, when it sort of clicks, then those moments are just wonderful, because they sort of redefine how we see humanity, I suppose, essentially. Yeah.
I think what you do, I think you as a person, I think you're an amazing person, and what you're doing is amazing. That last little story put a tear in my eye. I'm glad I wear glasses, because otherwise you'd see my eyes full of tears. But tears of joy for what you do. So thank you.
And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my experiences. Yeah, it's really valuable.
How can, if people are affected by what we've said today, how can they get in touch with you?
So there's an Alzheimer's, so people are worried about their own memory or a loved one, then they can call Alzheimer's Society. I don't have the number with me, but
we'll put it in the feed.
Google it.
Yes, you send it to me and I'll put it into the feed. Yeah.
Okay.
After, when we're done, it's all good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a national line which people can go through, and it can connect people with local support where they are as well. If there's any organisations out there that want to become part of the Southwark Dementia Action Alliance, which is a network of organisations that we support to be dementia friendly, then they should give me a call, and or send me an email, and I can send the details to you. But it's melanie.cressey@alzheimers.org.uk, and I can sort of kick that off for them as well.
Beautiful. Melanie, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your day and week, and thanks everybody for joining us. Don't forget, I will put any of the contact details in the Facebook feed if you need to get in touch with Melanie. So thanks everybody for joining us, and have a great rest of your week. Bye for now.
Wonderful. Thank you. Bye.